Trevor, do we want to go ahead and kick this off?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the plan group conversation. Today is May 21st, 2019. As always, our slides are available, and please ask questions in the document. And if you've written a great question, we'll probably ask you to verbalize it as well. So far, there's no questions, so would love for someone to be the first person to step up to the plate.
I have a question. Do we have any news in regarding to hiring the new product manager for Plan?
That's a great question, Valmir. We are working at probably the highest priority from a sourcing and recruiting perspective for a product manager for Plan. It's on all of our radars in terms of companies that we're looking for sourcing from, interview priority, making sure that interviews are scheduled concurrently, making sure that deep dives are being done and the issues are being prioritized appropriately. So from a prioritization perspective, it's probably at the top of the list, right next to some of the other director positions. I don't think there's anyone in like super late stage pipeline where we're like an hour or a day away from going to offer, but it's something that we are working through. So I hope that answers the question.
It does, thanks.
Yep, great.
Eric, I got a question for you to talk a little bit about. Recently, Gartner published a Magic Quadrant about enterprise agile planning tools, and it was really exciting because GitLab was recognized as a visionary. You want to talk a little bit about kind of the way you see us as a visionary and how you see us evolving in this space to continue to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, John. I'll answer, and then I actually might turn it back on you to answer your own question, just to give people on the call a product marketing perspective as well. And just so everyone knows, the Gartner Magic Quadrant is the visionary quadrant is the bottom right quadrant. So that's the one that essentially you have a great vision, so to speak. Vision's on the x-axis, and then ability to execute is on the y-axis. So room for improvement, but it's really neat to be in the visionary quadrant. I think there's a few reasons for that personally, which also kind of goes into on the slides. There's a slide about how we have a plan to be leaders in this space, and the first link on that slide talks about what are some of the mistakes of other PPM tools in the market right now. And really what you look at is you're looking at a very old school mentality of shipping software and implementing agile. And we are actually going more for the agile DevOps space, meaning we don't want super convoluted workflows. We don't want customized query languages in our product just so people can search and filter on issues and epics. We don't want there to be a whole lot of complexity in our planning product, because complexity introduces a whole lot of friction in terms of the adoption of the tool. It actually starts to introduce a lot of frustration and loathing from a developer and from a knowledge worker perspective. And so I think this is actually validation of our strategy, and you can go read it on the plan direction page. It'll talk about how we want to get the industry to an aspect of plan, break the plan, replan, break it, replan again. This is not the old school mentality of project management. 10 years ago, it was create a plan, stick to the plan, and do it in, we used to have this term WAGILE, right? Which is these teams that were planning in a waterfall methodology, but also we're trying to adopt to, agile methodologies at the same time. And it was almost like this running joke that you were a WAGILE shop. We want people to adopt agile DevOps, which means we want plans to be broken. In order for plans to be broken, it means that your planning and project management technology has to be very, very flexible. And I think it's great that Gartner recognizes that we're thinking about it this way. Not a lot of other tools in the space are thinking about it this way. And so I'm happy to go into more detail, but that's my thoughts on it. I'm happy where we're at. Obviously, I'm not super happy that we're not higher up on the execution bar in terms of how Gartner's analyzing us there. I think we have some room for improvement, but overall, like I like that we're in the visionary quadrant. I think it speaks a lot to where we're going. Do you want to add anything to that, John?
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think it was fantastic that when we participated in that process with the analysts at Gartner and shared with them the vision as to how we see a single application that can address all the work from planning to delivery, how they started to realize that so many other tools in the space have to force people into either building integrations and building linkages between tools. In fact, there's even tools to connect the data between other tools. There's a whole segment of tools that are just trying to connect between other tools. And they started to realize, and I think they saw the potential of where we're going and the vision where we're headed is really solving problems that both small teams have and large enterprises have. Now, I know as we go forward, there will be some complexity we add in. We're going to have to address the challenges of some big enterprises, but the vision, but where we're going, I think, is what's exciting because we're really helping organizations move from what you call Wagile or water scrumfall, which is not agile, to a place where they can really be responsive to what's happening in the market. So I'm thrilled by it, and I think the interactions with a number of other analyst firms on top of Gartner seems to reinforce this, that they're starting to realize that we're doing something very different here at GitLab. And so this is the opportunity for us to get the message out and share with the world what we're doing. You're on mute.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. Sorry. Thank you, John, for the question. Lucas, you have the next question. Do you want to verbalize it?
Sure. And maybe this has been in the works for a long time, and I just personally haven't seen this before, but I was curious if you could expand on the way that the plan team is split between like team planning and enterprise planning, as it seems like an interesting split around like size and capability for orgs, as I'm not aware of us doing that in other stages. And I'm curious what makes that different for plan, or if we're concerned about like diverging in terms of our approach to planning for like org size.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll answer, and I'd love for Shawn and Donald to jump in on this one as well. So this is actually something that we are working towards in most other stages. And when you look at the product hierarchy, we have stage, group, and then category. And what we've had for a long time is one product manager and one kind of engineering team per stage. We've now broken stages into multiple groups where a group has multiple categories. So as you've mentioned, and I'll pick on team planning for a while, team planning has, boards, and it has time tracking, and it's got project management as categories. That is something that a single product manager will be focusing on with a single PM team. We also have obviously two other categories in plan. So the long-term plan for plan is that there's 3 PMs, 1 per group. And if you look at the product organization as a whole, the goal is for there to be a product manager per group. So this extends into the other functions as well. So you look at Manage, for example, like Manage has Jeremy and Virginia, where Jeremy's focused on control and Virginia is focused more on the framework and analytics pieces of Manage. And then similarly for Create, we have 3 groups in Create. We have 2 PMs there. We're hiring for a 3rd. And so we're really kind of rallying around this group construct. And then hoping to also align engineering teams to that construct. But Shawn and Donald, I'd love for you to jump in and also talk about it from the engineering perspective.
Yeah, from an engineering perspective, one thing that's kind of interesting, but it's not a huge factor, but one thing I did find interesting when we talked about the split is what it means is that effectively one team does much more open source work than the other, because everything that's in core is open source and everything that's in every other tier isn't. And because the split is almost core paid tiers, it works out that way. So that's another way I've sort of thought about it when talking with my team. I think from an engineering perspective, it feels like there's a natural boundaries for like ownership of features as well. Hopefully we will be hiring a new engineering manager for plan soon. So we will have 2 backend engineering managers, and we'll be able to split the backend team before we split the rest of the the stage in the same way. Obviously, with 3 engineering managers and 1 interim PM, that's not the ratio we're looking for. But you know, it's how the hiring worked out, and we don't want to stop hiring in one area because of that. So yeah, I think it does make sense, but it did take me a little while to get my head around it, basically.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit on the front end side, because we're a little bit more delayed on the front end than Shawn and team is on the back end, in that we probably won't have an actual split until next year. We have front end engineers that are specialists on each of the groups, or what will be groups, but they're still going to be working on stuff from the other groups. So I do want to touch on your last point on there, and around are we worried about diverging on 2 different plan approaches? Because to be honest, I was a little worried about that, just having completely separate groups within the larger stage, in that how would we align each of those groups to make sure we're all kind of going toward the same higher level goals. I think on the product side, we just need to make sure that we are aligned, and that each of those groups are working very closely together, maybe under Eric or a director level, to make sure that everyone is constantly communicating with each other and constantly working toward that same higher level goal.
Great. Thank you.
Who's the next question? Christopher, you want to vocalize your question?
Sure. Basically, I was just commenting to the fact that the format looks different. So I was kind of wondering what was going on there. And for new members at GitLab, it'd be good for Shawn to verbalize his response.
Yeah, so I've been at GitLab for a while, and you know, we've had what we call functional group updates and now group conversations in one form or another for a while. And I just kind of always did them using GitLab pages, because I like to dog food the product. I don't really have many cases where I need to use GitLab pages otherwise, so it was kind of fun. So yeah, I have considered trying to match the slide template in CSS, but I'm really not good at CSS, and it's probably not a great use of my time. So I didn't yet. But if anybody wants to, like, the project is open source. So, you know, anybody can do that if they want to. I just not it, basically. Philippe, you had a question about GraphQL.
Yeah, thank you, Shawn. And you started to reply on the doc. Thank you for that. So yeah, when I hear GraphQL, I hear a lot of flexibility, and when I hear that, my security sensors are not that good. So I wonder, do you work with the security team to ensure that everything related to GraphQL is safe, and that we don't open some gates that were not expected in the first place?
Yeah, so like I said here, this is kind of a weird one, because we sort of took this on from Create. So like we kind of swapped some stuff with them, because Elasticsearch and search in general used to belong to Plan, then it moved to Create. So we took the GraphQL work off them. So they did most of this. So I'm just like basically repeating what they did. I think they already did work with the security team, but the main thing that they did was that in the GraphQL API, it's much easier to perform an authorization check on a specific field or a specific type. So like, you know, GraphQL, you can request another object as like the child of an object, which I'm not saying is a panacea. I don't think it's like a cure-all, but it does like solve some of the problems we see in the REST API, where in the past we've accidentally exposed a field that we didn't intend to, because some people should be able to see that field, but some people shouldn't. The GraphQL API, I'm not sure if this was very clear in the slides actually, is also very limited at the moment. It doesn't actually expose a lot, just because we're mostly focusing on making it, what's the word? We're mostly focusing on the sort of the infrastructure for it, by which I mean like you can authorize types and fields. We have monitoring, we have logging, documentation, all that stuff. And then as we go forward, we'll actually fill out the resources available. So it's probably something that we need to tackle on an ongoing basis as well, rather than just treat it as done, to check back in and get security reviews when we add a new major set of functionality to the GraphQL API, particularly in sensitive areas. Like at the moment, we don't expose any user management through the GraphQL API, but when we do that, I think that's a really good spot to hit. Actually, while I'm talking about GraphQL, the thing that makes me nervous about GraphQL is performance, because like you can do anything, and like the trick to performance optimizations a lot of the time is do less, but you don't control that so much here. But we've talked about some approaches there. Fabian, sorry, Philippe, did you have anything you wanted to follow up on that first?
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Cool. Fabian, you had a question. Do you want to verbalize it?
Yes. So first things is I'm a big fan of the plan features in GitLab. So I think you guys are doing amazing work. So one thing that I was wondering about is I think we're introducing many new interesting capabilities for project management, which are extremely valuable, but sort of out of selfish interest as a product manager, we also use GitLab for managing our own product. And I was wondering if we're also seeing ourselves sort of competing with dedicated product management software, if we are thinking about introducing features that make it, for example, easier to sort of understand why we are doing what we are doing, what like issues, how they connect to our OKRs, these types of functionalities, or is that not something that Plan is thinking about?
Yeah, I wrote some thoughts there, Fabian. Thanks for the question. The short answer is yes. We're obviously thinking about ways to make the product manager persona essentially more usable or more delighted as they use the product, so to speak. There's a lot of work happening right now on Epic visualization. Some of the features in project management will overlap like very, very heavily with respect to like what a product manager is going to need. And so Epic visualization is starting in 12 and 12.1. We're spending a lot of cycles on doing Epic visualization, doing drag and drop trees within an Epic itself, within an issue, and understanding where that issue lives in the hierarchy. So that's like one aspect of like a very near change that we're going to make that I think will help not only project managers, but also product managers, you and I. The other thing that I've been kicking around as well, and I'm glad you brought this up, is I think roadmaps is something that we are underserving a little bit. And I think there's a huge opportunity here. If you look at roadmaps right now, it's basically just a very simple Gantt chart of epics. There's no color coding, there's no ability to drag and drop things on the roadmap. And I think roadmaps, when you think about a category at GitLab, a category should be a standalone product at another company. There's multiple companies that have popped up around just doing road mapping. You look at, AHAs, like as you mentioned, you look at like the prod pads of the world, and they're actually doing really unique takes on road mapping. And so I've been thinking about pulling road mapping out as a category now that we've taken VSM and moved that to manage. I'm thinking that we probably pull road mapping up into its own category, and then we start to kind of dive a little bit deeper there. And then as Mark mentioned, obviously the personas is a big part of this, right? Which is we also want to link every issue, every feature back to a persona. So the details will eventually be linked from that link as well. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, thanks Eric for the answer. And I'm super pumped to hear that we're thinking about better roadmap support. That's extremely exciting.
Yeah, thanks. All right, Mark, you have the next question.
My usual question, you knew it was coming. How are we going to kill JIRA? Or saying it differently, how are we going to be a leader in the project management space?
Well, I didn't know this question was coming, but I did have a slide just in case it did show up on the group conversation. So slide 6 is a slide I put together for I think how we become a leader in this space. And so I'll just quickly talk through that slide. So I think the first thing we have to understand is understanding like the history of this space. I talked about this a little bit with John's question on the MQ. We have to learn from the past mistakes. A lot of those are written there in our handbook. And then there's also kind of some statements we've made that we said, we're not going to do this. Like we'll actively not make this same mistake. So like what's an example there? We will not have our own query language that we will force customers to use just to be able to search through issues. We will embrace the small primitive mindset where we develop a very sharp tool that can be used in a number of different ways. and maybe becomes a Swiss Army knife over time. But what that does is it allows us to essentially spend a lot less engineering effort and create a lot more use cases. And so we have to learn from the industry's past mistakes. That's number one. Number two, there's just some table stakes things that project managers need that we don't yet have. We have to get that functionality in place. And so these are things like epic dependencies, visualizing epics that span maybe more than one group. And so there's obviously links here that you can go and take a look at, and please participate. Any of you should go and participate in any of these issues if you care deeply about them. So there's one aspect, is getting functionality that doesn't exist into the product. Another aspect of it is making the functionality that exists a little bit better. We need to make our product more lovable. There's not a single category that is marked as lovable maturity in plan. And so it's moving some of those things to lovable. And I'd like to start with boards. I think boards is one of the things that most of us love about this product. It's a thing that obviously JIRA acquired Trello literally just for boards. And so it's very, very powerful. It's a really easy way to get started with really any task. You can manage your house with boards, or you can manage a project with boards. It's
Do you mind if I just jump in there, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So we talked about splitting the plan team. One thing I've used boards for there is I created a project, just a private project, and I created issues for each team member who needs to be on one of the two teams with labels for, like, you know, where they're based in the world, if they had any preference, whether they're senior or intermediate. And then I can just drag those between the two teams and see if, like, all those factors balance out. So that's kind of a weird use of boards, but yeah, dog fooding again.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that, Shawn. Let me move on because we're running out of time here. We want to attract other use cases. There are things in the project management and portfolio management space that we don't have any functionality around today. These are things like quality management, requirements management. These are really old areas, and when I say old, they're very embedded in a very legacy IT mindset of developing software, developing requirements. These are areas that are ripe to be disrupted that we can go and attack. And so I'm excited for these areas. And we haven't done anything in them. So it's expanding the user base of who's going to actually use our planning features. We need to increase adoption, though, is another big one that we don't often talk about this, but epics are an ultimate feature, which means that we have a very small percentage of GitLab customers actually using epics if they're not using an open source project on gitlab.com. There's a lot of features that I think we need to reevaluate with respect to plan to maybe consider moving them down tiers. We're starting with moving multiple issue boards down to core. I announced that on the company call yesterday, but I think we can get a lot better in terms of getting our foot in in the door, so to speak, with someone's project management and portfolio management needs if we just enabled features to be a little bit more accessible. And then the last thing is we need to make it really easy for JIRA users to switch to GitLab. And I threw the zombie emoji on there because this is a 2-year-old issue that really doesn't have a strong reason in it if you read through all the comments on like why we haven't necessarily done it. Yeah, there's some technical challenges in how you map custom fields to various aspects in GitLab, but I think if we actually just put some thought into this, we could actually make this something really, really easy to do. And just so everyone knows, you can import JIRA issues today, but it's just a simple CSV import, and it's just going to take title and description. It's not going to grab all the rest of the stuff. So these are my thoughts. I would love for the rest of the plan team to jump in if you'd like.
If I could just sort of, it seems like one of the big things is making the product, the boards more powerful, making them more lovable. Clicking through that epic, though, it does look pretty light at this point. There's a couple of items in there. I guess I'd love to see that fleshed out with a little bit more of a concrete plan for, what do people really need with issue boards? I mean, I know I've got my pet things that I remember from using Trello that aren't captured in that epic yet. It just feels like that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more.
Yeah, let me just tell you where we're starting there real quick. I'm going to actually update an issue description. The group board move, let me rephrase. Multi-select move issues in boards is something that is top of mind, which is in that epic. So that's where we're starting. And then we'll figure out where we need to go. But the fair point, we'll flesh that out.
Cool, thanks.
Yep. All right, next question. Matt, you have the next question.
Yes, so I caught that we're splitting the teams and then one team maybe focus on core features. So the question is, are we tracking community contribution efforts here to help us accelerate or anything along those lines?
I haven't been. I guess this is really for me or Donald. We do get quite a lot of community contributions, just because Plan is a stage that's existed in GitLab for a long time. But I haven't been. So I know at the moment, for instance, we have a community contribution in to add a new issue tracker, the name of which I've forgotten, to like our external integrations there, which is really awesome. And I think that's getting close to being ready. But we're not tracking this in any way other than like the throughput charts and so on. That's quite a disappointing answer to end on. Maybe we can squeeze one more one more question in.
So I'm next on the list, Hugo. My question is, as we try to cater to more enterprise customers, right? I foresee, a bunch of requests coming along our way. That we align more with scale frameworks, right? Either SAFe, Scrum Scale, or even if a company is adopting Kanban with the KMM. So what are we planning on balancing those requests with our own vision of bringing this planning stage to big enterprises? Are we planning on drawing from our experiences? And then we're going to be educating customers. We're going to be dogfooding and then educating customers on how to use from our lenses. What are your thoughts on that space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a very meaty question. I'll very quickly answer and say that we take a modern first approach to project management, which doesn't necessarily mean that we're just ignoring all of these other frameworks that you've mentioned, though. Mm-hmm. I think in most cases there's overlap there that we can solve for in a modern way and let people still adhere to their framework is how I would very, very quickly answer that question. Cool. And then, but you started the question in a different sense, which is how do we balance features from big requests and then our own vision? A lot of that comes down to education. In some cases, the big requests are things we already want to do, or they align with our vision. So for example, I was on the phone with a big customer last week that asked for multi-issue move in boards. It's like a no-brainer, like we should go do that to make boards more lovable. And we're going to go do that. I think it's prioritized in 12.1 or 12.2. But for things that like maybe misaligned, that's where we put a little bit more thought into it and becomes a little bit more of a conversation. It becomes more of an education. Like, hey, do you need that because your framework says you need it? Then that's a different bucket that we would put it into. Or do you need it because it's just how you've always done it in another project management tool? Then it becomes more of a conversation on how we can either adapt their workflow to our tool, or can you reuse a small primitive? But yeah, we definitely don't want to just do anything customers ask us to do, because then we'll get into this situation 2 or 3 years down the road, maybe 5 years down the road, where we've got this feature we've got this product with 1 million features in it that is just a disparate mess of things that is hard to use and hard to navigate, and everyone hates it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We are at time, so we'll have to end the call now. Any other questions can be taken offline.
Thanks everyone.
Bye all.